Hey everyone, it's Jen.
And Ali.
And you're listening to Rising Within Podcast,
a show where we come together to connect the heart, head, and spirit.
Just like rhythm, lyrics, and melody. The fact that we're starting this today officially, like starting to talk and have a conversation, because this week was actually a very important week because the full moon was aspecting the nodes of fate, which are our theme collectively for the next 2 years in Taurus and Scorpio. So the energy was like, and also Pluto was involved. So Pluto is a planet that has to do with transformation, and it usually kind of destroys to rebuild. And in this aspect, it was actually had positive aspects with these two, energies. But if you can imagine, the sky was at a four-way. Like if all cars are coming at a four-way, who's going to go first? And so it's almost like full moon being in Leo. It's about self-love and leadership and being able to, provide that for yourself, fill yourself up. And then the opposition, which is what full moons are, the sun was in Aquarius, which is about community. So that was, part of the energy. And so it's like self and community. And then we have the nodes of fate, which are in play, this was kind of a glimpse as to what's to come for people. And
I see.
The subconscious is what Scorpio represents. So it's like some people's past came in really heavily this week. And it's like, and then also there's this energy of, I want to go and grow something different. So it's like the past and the future, the self and the community, all in the energy of the sky. And some people wanting to move forward, and some people were having a hard time being swallowed by maybe some of the.
Yeah. Well, the way that you're describing it and the way that I have felt it, it feels as if there's been great opportunity for ownership of self. Ownership of the good, bad, and ugly, like all sides.
Yeah.
And then there's been, I feel, amazing opportunity, at least at the beginning of this year, the first few months, to really release and let go. And we often say that in this line of work, release and let go of what's no longer serving you. But the feeling of the releasing has been, oh, it's not been serving you. And it's not been serving you for some time. And you somehow kind of know on some level it's not been serving you. But this is your last reminder, last opportunity to really, let go of it, because sometimes we feel like we're willing to release, but we still have such a tightly closed fist around the thing that we're attempting to release, because it's all that we've known. And there's comfort in sticking with what you know. But I'm noticing with clients, and I'm noticing with a lot of other people that are connected intuitively, there's a lot of forcing things to the surface in order for resolution and closure, to make way for what Leo was bringing forward with the full moon, and to make way for someone stepping into their inheritance. Like there's a very strong feeling right now of stepping into soul, how you want to term it, soul contracts, karmic, what have you, inheritance, but spiritually stepping into capability and potential and possibility that's always been there, but you may have been spinning wheels the last few years. It's kind of the sense I got. I don't know everything in terms of astrology. I just read the energy.
But this is beautiful blend, and I love the way your way of presenting it, because I think that it as I've seen for different people, it's manifested differently. And for you, it seemed like this really big, powerful ownership, right? As you put it, and you being a rising Leo, it would be all about yourself and your identity, and claiming that and all of that, which is amazing. And I think where it is in your chart really played a factor into how it played out for you. I can relate to this, where the answer within yourself, and the behavior or things have been shown, you're not ready to quite let it go.
It's very hard to make peace with knowing that something needs to be done versus doing it. Very difficult to switch those gears.
Yeah, this one wasn't as groundbreaking for me, but the past showed up in an interesting way, where I was helping someone out through a situation that I had previously gone through. Because I think people forget that we can empower ourselves, and I so understand when you're in that moment, it's hard for you to see outside the bucket. You can choose how much you want to participate in that energy.
Absolutely.
And for me, once once you keep getting that lesson, and then eventually you reach that I'm done part, for me, the door is shut and the door is locked. I want to empower people by saying once you make that decision, you've learned that lesson, and you won't allow that to happen again, because I think there's some fear behind that sometimes. Or
You
like,
won't allow, but you'll still be tested.
of
And I
course,
think I
yes.
think we forget to anticipate that we'll still be tested on these same things. But it really is spirit and the universe's way of allowing you to own, oh, I have grown. How else do we have those benchmarks or those key indicators for ourselves that we have progressed, other than facing the same issue and handling it completely differently than we did the first time
Yeah.
or the millionth time that we
Yeah.
dealt with
It was almost like the universe, you're right, like sort of testing how would you navigate it at this
it.
level or at this lens, and how would you, advise yourself at this point.
These same lessons don't just pop up to test us, they sometimes pop up so that we have to reaffirm and double down on our own power of manifestation. It's an opportunity for us to perhaps look beyond what's been presented to us as the ongoing problem or the ongoing lesson. Look beyond it and decide, no, I decided a long time ago that wasn't for me, or I'm not about the situation, or so instead I'm going to throw back at the universe what is for me
Yeah.
and what I am about.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. That well said. You are so good at the nuggets and just like bringing things together cohesively.
I
Like,
get a lot of help. I get a lot of help in spirit. They gave me that one through some visuals and like, oh yeah, be sure to talk about this concept.
but I want to no, hold on. I'm gonna also say to you though, you've done an immense amount of work through your own process and understanding and innately who you are, because I have definitely encountered other people who are able to, channel spirit, and sometimes they just do the direct message, right? From like,
Hmm.
spirit to mouth. And correct me if I'm wrong, because but this is how
Hmm.
it comes through to me. You're able to take the message and almost like deliver it in a way that's still very poignant and to the point, but also with a lot of heart. So it doesn't hit the person
Yes.
with like this, like, because I've had that when sometimes you need that kick in the butt. But with you, you're still able to get through to somebody in a way where it doesn't
Mm.
derail them further. You know what I mean? Through
Oh,
the
thank you so
trigger
much. Well,
process.
because for me, I'm not channeling messages. For me, I'm channeling and vocalizing conversation because it's always back and forth conversation and discourse between spirit and I while channeling.
Right.
And I'm basically distilling the essence of that back and forth between spirit and I. So if they present me with something that is a message that would be vague or a bit harsh or anything of that nature, I'm always throwing back at them, okay, but what's 10 other ways to say this? And give me some examples of this. What are some metaphors that would go alongside this? Is there any learned experience in this person's life that would parallel what it is that I'm trying to communicate right now? Yeah.
Say Allison has been sort of a spiritual mentor for me to get me to this point. She's the first one to point out that I have psychic abilities. And I was like, so what do I do about that? And how does that come into like what, And cool. And it wasn't until the last, I feel like, 3 years that I really understood it to the degree that I operate on it now and able to do things with it with myself. But yeah, you definitely have mentioned to me about there's a co-creation aspect in it. And so,
Absolutely.
I've definitely suffered the like them trying to like, get a point across in a way that's like like emotionally like taxing on me, right? And so you've given me the ability to be like, hey guys, because I was at first on this journey letting them lead and me just like following and doing whatever they want.
Oh, girl, I
I
let
know.
them lead for years, and it was exhausting. It was
Yeah,
so
exactly.
exhausting.
Yeah, so thank you. I know, not for like having to go through that, but sharing that with me and now with others,
Of course.
because then you realize, hey guys, like I understand that you're trying to get my attention on this matter. Message received. Can you give me a different way to approach this? Because sometimes they can trigger me into a like a longer roundabout way of getting to where I need to be. And I'm like, you could have said it differently, or, and it would have gotten through. So it's interesting in that respect too.
Well, and there's a lot of layers and levels to that because communication is based on the assumption that we're both speaking the same language.
Mm.
And spirit does the best that spirit can do with what spirit has to work with within our own intellect. And so the human English language that we're using is limiting to begin with, and then they're having to take these higher vibrational concepts and shove them and cram them into Webster's dictionary of words and terminology.
Mm.
But then also we label things and define things to the nth degree here, every single thing. Whereas they don't necessarily label and define everything within spiritual energy. So like oftentimes when I'll receive a lot of charades type stuff. Like, well, the concept we're trying to portray is sort of like this, sounds like this, looks like this, but is not that, and is maybe closer to these other things, but it's also not those things. So they do the best that they can with what they have to work with all the time.
That's
Yes.
helpful. See, that's helpful. And okay, so
I mean,
Allison's like a little bit more of an extraordinaire on these abilities because she's not limited by just one thing. I think it's safe to say you have a multitude of things at your disposal through your own experiences
mhm.
that you can bring to the table to help somebody. I think a conversation that came up recently with a friend of mine who's a very much an intellectual. The question, she's like, I don't understand the difference between mediumship and psychic abilities. How would you define that?
Okay, so by definition, mediumship is connecting to an energy outside of yourself through way of communication or channeling.
Yeah.
So the most popular example of mediumship would of course be ghosts or loved ones on the other side, and that's what people identify to being akin to a medium. But
Right.
mediumship means that you can also receive, entities, beings that are elsewhere, interdimensional, what have you,
Right.
anything that you believe on this spectrum of energy that exists outside of our dimension, our timeline, our space of occupation would be mediumship. And then psychic ability, you can be a medium, but you can also not be a medium. But psychic ability is really more timeline based in terms of past, present, future information. It's not necessarily reaching outside of time and space for information and connecting to different entities, but you can, not all psychics are mediums, but quite a few mediums are psychic. I don't know if that sounds
No.
confusing,
No,
but
no, it does. No.
mediumship mediumship can be a tool for psychic ability, just
Okay.
like how tarot is a tool for psychic ability, astrology is a tool for psychic ability, mediumship or spirit communication is another tool for psychic ability. And in fact, that's where I get all my psychic information is from spirits that I communicate with.
Okay, so that makes sense because I'm curious, like, if you're psychic, are you not communicating with with spirit?
I mean, it's all communicating with spirit.
Okay,
It's all
okay,
communicating with spirit, but it's whether you feel that you're doing that directly and
okay.
whether you feel that you're using a tool between yourself and spirit. Like, what kind of phone line are you using? Are you using an old school Blackberry? Are you using a Nokia brick? Or are you using the newest, like, what is it, iPhone Max 22.2? But not everyone who is a psychic is a medium. Mediumship is its own very separate thing. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me because it's, as you know, I've said to Allison, I'm like mediumship, but like I I'm like comfortable in my like cool area of the psychic realm, and that was even harder for me to even say that term or even own it because I think I kind of hid behind astrology as a way to feel like, oh, this is more socially acceptable. To some people, it's like this is weird too, but
Okay,
for
but
me.
girl,
Yeah,
you are engaging in mediumship just talking to your spirit guides on the
yeah,
daily.
yeah. Yeah. Yes, they've told me about this understanding is that before we got here, we soul contracts and things in karma that we come into this lifetime to do work ourselves out with. We already have sort of a language with our guides that we've decided in the way that's very individual on how we're going to communicate with them. So I mean, this just sharing like what works for us may not resonate with somebody else based on the fact that like their gifts or whatever they have is more like individual in how they want to connect with their
Mhm.
guides. So my guides sometimes connect through music, and they also show me like, sometimes things on TikTok and taking me to haunted houses, and I'm like, wow, what's wrong? And it was funny because the last like three meditations I did, it felt different. And usually when I drop into a meditation, but the last three I was like, I felt a little bit like scared, but it wasn't my guide's energy. It was this like I could hear stuff a little bit, something felt around my neck,
Mhm.
like
But imagine for a second, suspend the idea of a haunted house and everything that comes
yes,
with it. But
totally.
imagine for a second that that is perhaps a new project to take on out of intellectual interest, knowing that you've got a medium by your side who eats, sleeps, breathes all of this and has has cleansed haunted houses for years. I
Yeah.
think it's just an opportunity to be exposed to and feel new energy, and what you choose to do in terms of assimilating what you're feeling and experiencing and how you choose to sort that within yourself, that's up to you and that's your journey. But it at least presents the opportunity for sensing and feeling and experiencing new things,
Right.
which adds to the internal spiritual Rolodex. Even
Right.
if it's ruling out energies you would work with all the time, it means you can then more quickly identify that energy to be like, oh, nope, that's not the direction I'm headed in. Rather than spending a lot of time like, what is this? I don't understand.
Yeah. No, no, you said that beautifully, and thank you for that because that's very much a synchronistic message I got this week. Because I think there's a quote where it was like,
Hmm.
if it's, you know, taking up real estate in your brain and it's out of your control, then it deserves your freedom too. But
Hmm.
I was to add to that, it was like the message I got from it from my guides was like, yes, if it's taking up real estate in your brain and it's out of your control, it deserves your freedom too. But if it's taking up real estate in your brain and there's steps and ways in which you can learn more about it, rather than focusing on the fear aspect of it, because we only fear what that's unknown. So you're
Hmm.
more like spending the energy empowering yourself, like educating yourself more about something that
Absolutely.
you like this for me would allow me to maybe feel like I'm going into a dark room without any sort of understanding. Thank you for confirming that for me because I was like, yeah, that's exactly how I kind of want to approach this new interesting thing that showed up.
Well, and it's cool that these new things are coming up right when we're taking on a new collaborative project
Mhm.
at the same time, because I mean, this gives you opportunity to ask other people about their haunted house stories and their ghost stories and hear their experiences rather than you experiencing your own.
That's
Hear
true.
hear through them,
Yeah.
and then validate and affirm through what you receive while hearing those stories instead of being in the haunting yourself.
Totally.
So there's so many ways to expose yourself to it and to without actually having to go to some dilapidated, decrepit house and deal with that because not
Well,
everybody wants
that
to.
would
Not
never
everybody wants
be
to do
my
that.
no, that would never be my MO. I do it's so weird, like, I guess this kinda makes sense now because 'cause I've always liked to, like, like, I liked going to like, the simulated haunted house sort of stuff.
Yes, yes.
And I really love Halloween. I've always been interested in, like, what's outside of just these 3D, wall. Like, I'd love to learn about Salem, would love to learn about all these different things because it's so fascinating to me, and, like, I find a lot of peace being in the cemetery. Like, my parents used to live right by one, and so during the pandemic, that's where I would spend most of my
They're
time.
very sacred feeling. They're
Yeah,
very sacred, they're very and I think it's a lot of things. I think it's that the bodies are physically buried there. There are bones in the ground and just bones themselves, the energy is just so deeply earthly earthy and so grounding.
yeah,
But then the ritual and ceremony aspect associated with funerals and the procession of all that stacks on top of that even more like reverence or even more energy that's sacred.
mhm,
And then when you add on top of that the layers of belief or religion, if there was any practice, that adds more layers of sacred energy. So it's just a very still, calm
Mhm.
kind of feeling normally, unless, I mean, it's poltergeist style and the graves have been disturbed and people are upsetty spaghetti about it.
Light and dark obviously exist within this world, within different worlds, and I understand that concept. But I think because like just working through my own energy personally helps me sort of stay more with the higher part of it, so that like I'm not attracting to that energy necessarily.
But it's also important to stay within your own energy because that's your home base and that's
Right.
how you ground back down. You
Right.
need to always at all points,
Yeah.
no matter what type of energy you're engaging in or how far you go externally with any of this spiritual work, you always need to be able to come to home base and be centered. It's the foundation of your practice. And that's what keeps you in spiritual health to be able to do the work that you're doing.
Totally. There's a book I read the quote where it's like some people are so spiritual they're no earthly good, right? And the idea that like
Hmm.
you're too far in that spectrum, not owning the human experience part of it. You're
No,
just
and I've been there and I know what it feels like and it's not a great feeling. You don't feel human. You feel so separate from everyone else around you and you feel so separate from earthly concerns
yeah.
that then it's a very apathetic space to be in and it doesn't lend to the empathy and compassion and self-awareness that's needed in having the human journey, in my opinion. So
No,
yeah, it's
100%.
tough. Staying centered and coming back to self is probably the most important thing. It's just fun to play in all the other areas. It's fun to play in hauntings and cemeteries and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day you need to be able to come back to your house, which is you, your temple, your body.
I'm curious. I mean, if you recall or able to sort of share a little bit about your evolution.
Have I had awareness my entire life? Absolutely. About being psychic. I've had awareness my entire life about being psychic because I always seemed to know things were going to happen before they did. I could always anticipate that a certain assignment in school or a certain thing needed for work would happen. And then I would find myself preparing for those things before even having the intellectual knowledge that those things were needed. And
Mm-hmm.
I've always had prophetic dreams to the point of dreaming something's happening with someone else that I know completely in a different separate area than myself while I'm experiencing the dream. But the mediumship ability was more so opened up all at once for me and was in my mid 20s. And it came on the heels of a very intensive period of time that I was working towards self love and self acceptance. So I came to understand that for me personally, all of my gifts truly blossomed and came alive and came awake when I was fully aware of myself and owning myself and loving myself and celebrating within myself. And it was only when I felt fully comfortable within my own skin that the rest happened. The mediumship was always there. And we know it's always there because we think we hear something and then like there's no actual physical sound to go with what we think we hear.
Right.
Or we think we see something, flashes in the corner of our eyes, but nothing's actually there. Was that a shadow? Was that a play of light? Oh, who cares? I'm just not going to pay attention to it. I'm just going to
Yeah.
throw that out in my mind. So, I mean, I've always had those, and that's how you know that the mediumship's there, but I was never conversing directly. That was more so I woke up one day and I could see them everywhere. Like my clairvoyancy just turned on one day.
So when you say you see them, like, do you like see what do you see exactly? Just for people that don't know.
It's changed and evolved over the years. So when my abilities first opened up, because it was a lot of having to learn how to use them, I was
Mhm.
seeing people in full detail. Now it's kind of distilled down to I'm only visually seeing what would be identifying characteristics
Mhm.
of a person rather than seeing the full person because that's just too much information. But in the beginning, it was everything. And then also seeing on top of that auras around spirits, people, objects, just about everything.
Do you see it in your mind or do you see it like as if it was really like there?
The way I've always described it for years,
Yeah.
when doing intuitive development and when doing open public lectures about this kind of stuff, is that it's almost like a double exposed negative, which is maybe dating myself saying that, but it's almost as if there's a photo filter on top of a photo where, like, my eyes, the viewfinder that I'm seeing the world is the same as everybody else, but what my brain is interpreting is the double exposed negative, where there's a picture on top of the picture. So I'm able to see and sense that it's not physically there, not physically real. In the beginning, it would fool me a little bit, and I would be like, "That's an actual person." But over time, it became much more obvious that there was just certain saturation, color tones, like there were certain just little things that were off in terms of it being fully flushed out form. And then I was able to kind of tell that more double exposed negative thing where it's like, okay, that's not actually here, but it's here.
You're so impressive to me. Like that was very well explained because it is something that is very much that's like hard to quantify, right? Like it's
Oh, it's all very hard to quantify. There is no, and that's the frustration in all this is that as we discussed earlier, we as human beings are used to defining things to the nth degree.
yeah,
There is no defining spirit to the nth degree.
yeah.
Good luck.
I
Mhm.
feel like what limits us in this understanding is our ego, right? Our ego doesn't want to
Yes.
die. Our ego is the one that will be like, no, that didn't actually happen. This isn't actually
Hmm.
possible. And that's okay that some people are there. And I totally get everyone's in different stages. I've experienced that through my own friends and whatever and family members. But like at this point, so much stuff has
Hmm.
happened where it's like, yeah, no, this is legit. But like sometimes my ego will creep in and it always does because Terminator, it's like, I'll be back. Right? You know, like, don't worry, I'll be back. But, because it wants to exist. And so by like acknowledging other things, it's almost like doesn't want to die.
There's some really powerful cornerstones involved in that work to laying the foundation of self love.
Mhm.
And part of that is letting go of what others think of you and letting go of external rhetoric.
Yeah.
And I mean, you have to let go of that if you're going into any arena of spirituality
Yeah.
because you can't predefine the message. And if you try to predefine the message with a bunch of external rhetoric, then like, are you even receiving? And are you even going to accept what you're receiving? Another cornerstone for self-love and self-work is trust and not allowing for doubt to sow within you or to sprout within you, right? And so you cannot go into a spiritual journey or arena with doubt
Yeah.
either, because
Yeah.
then you're just then the whole time you're all jazzed and excited that you're receiving, but then every other moment you're like, but am I receiving or am I making this up? No, no, this is great, this is great, this is wonderful information,
Yeah.
but wait a second, I really want these things to happen. So am I making it up for myself? Like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
You're
there are
describing.
certain steps in the journey of self-love that are so needed in order to allow yourself to go out on a limb, out on a branch with spirituality. And it's very reminiscent to me of like the fool's journey through tarot as well,
Mm,
because that fool card is just so iconic in terms of, the young ingenue that's all naive. But sometimes you need to be in that space of openness and expansiveness, and anything can happen in
yeah.
order to be presented the cliffside and the clouds in the sky and everything else.
Kind of reminds me of actually, I just watched Inside Out, and it reminded me of that. All the different emotions are trying to like drive the ship, and so sometimes
Hmm.
your guides can talk over you, and like one of them wants to get.
Oh, and sometimes they are not on the same page.
Yes, exactly. And so that's why that movie really, really was a good reminder. I can sense that my guides are a little bit like that within the
Yeah, it
film.
was overwhelming. When I was tuning into it, it was overwhelming. And I was like, who wants to speak first? Like, they were all speaking at once, and they were all like, they all needed to be louder than the next one. And it was like, it was an out shouting match. And I was just, I don't know. I'm very type A, and despite the spiritual woo woo nature of the work that I do,
Yeah,
I am very left brained as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
So I'm the first person to open up my DMV kiosk and be like, "Okay, guys, get in line. Like, get in some semblance of a line. Take a number, and you'll each have a turn to talk, but in turns, one at a time." Yeah.
which is great. You're versatile in your style of of appealing to different people, I think, which is great.
I think that the goal that we strive for in living life, the purpose of life, so to speak, would be to find balance in all things, right? Find balance within ourselves, find balance within our lives. And spiritual work needs to be balanced. It
Yeah.
shouldn't just be all out there all the time and, vague messages and weird entities showing up with no explanation as to who the heck that entity is and where they come from. Like, that's just, everyone's got a different level of acceptability within spirit work. And my
Yeah.
level of acceptability, which my guides, they're rolling their eyes at me and being like at the water cooler, like, yeah, like, she can sometimes be a bit of a battle axe, can't she? But my level of expectation within spirit is for it to be a little bit more like grounded, is for it to be a little bit more organized so that it's
Yeah.
easier to digest,
Yes.
because
No, it's
because it can be so intimidating, so all over the place, so, and it can make you feel out of balance, or it can make you feel ungrounded when the information's coming forward and it's so confusing or all over the place. Yeah.
yeah.
So no, I force is force an okay word? Yes. I force organization within
Good though.
spiritual energy.
I'm all mutable energy, which means I'm very versatile, go with the flow. And sometimes, I do have some earth in my chart, a hefty amount. So
Mhm.
I think that's why initially when we met, you're like, "Are you have some Capricorn or whatnot?" Because I can be really work
I
oriented.
always feel Capricorn about you though. I don't understand. I always feel that.
I also gravitate towards groundedness and spirituality because Capricorn is in my Scorpio house, which would be of the occult and
Mm,
be of all the psychological stuff. So there is my chart is screams, guys, spirituality and psychology. That's where my soul came down here to do. And so I think
mhm,
that's how I do readings and what I gravitate towards because of that. So there's three energies, and that's where I get on my left side ringing in the ear because that's kind of my key to spirituality is through my Capricorn and even my Pisces, which is like what my career is about, is in the 10th house of Capricorn. So, right.
mm.
So it's even that other layer to it. And so basically, there's earth in all of these spiritual components in my chart, the 12th as well as the 8th. I'm similar to Allison, where I feel somebody's energy in their presence, and then the chart itself is more visual for a feeling I felt in their energy.
Your tool of choice is astrology.
Yeah.
Others will use tarot. Others will use pendulums and what have you. But
Use whatever tool you need in the toolbox, whatever you gravitate towards. That's what I feel. Yeah.
I'm my tool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're a Swiss Army knife. I think I've already told you
I
that.
know we've talked about this.
Yeah.
We've talked about me and my Swiss Army knife ways.
Yeah.
And
Because
sometimes I'm
Allison,
like, can I just be a utensil? Can I just be one thing?